All right, chat. Let's talk strengthenings now, because this is a thing. Like, we've now gotten Servant Strengthening Quest Part 18. Now, as chat has said, this is a long time since our last one. Obviously, we got one at anniversary of the prior year. We basically get one every anniversary. So you can see Part 17 there was literally 9th anniversary. And then Part 16 was 8th anniversary. Part 15 was 7th anniversary. And Part 14 was 6th anniversary. So we have, for the past 4 anniversaries pretty much, gotten just strengthening quests. That's it. You have to go all the way back to April of 2021 for us to have a non-anniversary related strengthening quest campaign with, again, part 13 here. So it's been a hot second, and it's definitely nice. Now we have all of the strengthenings half cost. It's been a long time since we've had that. It's been 4 years since we've had a non-anniversary related one. And this first group here has, again, an interesting thing, because we already get a buff to Arjuna, and Arjuna is definitely a unit that needs that upgrade. Talked a lot about that already in the other video, and I do think that it's an interesting one for him that still sort of preserves what he is as a unit and his identity, and doesn't just homogenize him with every other archer out there. I do like this buff. I don't think it's necessarily a terribly strong one. I think they could have enhanced his damage output, but he is really, really good in a challenge environment, and I think this buff kind of just leans into that while still making him fairly good for farming. That being said, we have a number of buffs upcoming here. So just kind of showing you guys can see the first one was the 5-star archer there. We are going to get a buff each day, concluding on April 1st, which is hilarious that that is going to basically end up being April Fools. But the way to look at this is we have 2 4-star assassins, a 5-star berserker, a 3-star rider, a 4-star rider, and a 5-star lancer. So there's a lot here to digest. There's a lot we could still kind of talk about. I do think it's rather interesting in that regard, but I do think there's also just some possibilities for like who could and couldn't get these. Now, when it comes to the 4-star assassins, there's a lot of units out there that could need love. 4-star assassins have frankly been neglected to a large degree. We have seen units like Wu get the buff over and over and over and over and over again, to the point where Wu can actually deal more damage than some of the 5-stars now. I think it's like, it's okay for Wu to be strong, but the sheer amount of attention that Wu has gotten to the expense of like some of the other ones is kind of ridiculous. Mr. Fister has also gotten a ton of buffs over the years, so that's basically just probably not going to happen again for him, if you ask me. I think this could be a time period where you could see units like Kiritsugu get an upgrade, units like Kato Danzo get an upgrade, units like Consort Yu, or possibly even Satheno. Now, there's even some outward cases out there for this being something like, say, an Okita assassin buff, where even though her damage output is quite nice, even though she is capable of like looping and stuff now, she still has a lot of demerits in the kit that the developers could maybe just choose to give her kind of a fix for. So there's no real telling what these upgrades could be. They could be something in the way of obviously an NP interlude to really help out a unit's overall performance, or it could be something a little bit more designed at fixing a problem that the unit has in their kit. So I think there's a lot of ideas for who these 4-star assassins could be. And the fact that there are 2 of them kind of leaves the door open for there being a lot. I will caution you guys against trying to like form patterns here and assume that everything is going to be a pattern. We've seen people try to do this with strengthenings before, particularly at anniversary. There is not always a pattern. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. Sometimes the devs just kind of do what they want to do. And so I wouldn't necessarily guarantee that something like that is going to happen. Now, with regards to things like, say, the 5-star berserker, there's also a couple of possibilities out there that I think people would really like to see. One of them is naturally going to be someone like Xiang Yu, that just really has flown under the radar for a long time. Xiang Yu is not really in a good state compared to some of his other contemporaries. The developers have leaned really hard into crit damage for him, and it hasn't really helped him out too much because his ability to be used on a turn-to-turn basis is rather anemic. He doesn't really have good refund. He doesn't really have charge. So he's not in a solid spot. And the only real claim to fame that he has is Invuln Pierce, since he doesn't even have a niche. So I do think there's a lot of potential here for him. And especially, you know, not to get too much into patterns, but especially if, say, the prior assassin ends up being Consort Yu, then having Consort Yu into Xiang Yu makes a lot of sense. But who knows, right? That could just be, you know, grasping at straws and maybe just wishful thinking. But I do think he is a unit that could definitely use the attention at this point in time. There's also units out there like, say, Nightingale that are kind of perennially on the shit list for people. It's not that Nightingale is unusable by any stretch of the imagination. It's just that I feel like a lot of people kind of prioritize other options. If you're looking for, say, just like a buster buffer, you've got units out there like Merlin or Koinskaya of Dark that can kind of handle a lot of stuff for you and still manage to charge the party. If you're looking for somebody that's maybe trying to reduce the overall damage output of an enemy, obviously you can do that with Nightingale, but there are other ways to just outright prevent damage, a la Castoria and like Joan of Arc and other stuff. So I don't necessarily feel like she's the best fit there nowadays. And then you still manage to have other things like I'm gonna say like kind of like debuff immunity and such that other units can provide for the party or for a like select person. I also think the fact that Nightingale is a berserker and a rather squishy one at that does not help things out too much, and she doesn't have any hard defense herself. So one of the ways that they could improve her would be to give her some sort of hard survivability on her own end. That might make her a little bit of a monster for doing things like solos and stuff though, so we just have to see what the developers would think with regards to that. I do think there's a couple other possibilities here as well, including maybe some of the single target berserkers, as well as, you know, maybe even the occasional odd AoE that we may not have talked about. It's certainly possible that other units could end up getting an upgrade, even something as crazy as like Arjuna Alter, who to me definitely doesn't need the damage output, but there's no telling really what the devs do here and what they're thinking of. It may just come down to these all being units that really need the upgrade, or the devs may just be kind of sprinkling in upgrades to other units that don't fit into the current events that are going to be coming out this year. So I think the latter is probably more likely. As much as I would like to assume that these are all going to be units that really need it, you may see some units in here that are maybe head scratchers and not necessarily as like obvious as some of the others, where you go like, well, you know, they didn't really need the buff, why did they get it? Your 5-star berserker may be the epitome of just that, so we'll have to see what they kind of do in that regard. Now, with regards to your 3-star rider, there's really only a couple of possibilities here. I think Ushi at this point is kind of odd man out. Ushi has received a ton of buffs, so I don't see her really getting the attention here. You could as well see maybe something for like Boudica yet again, but she's also another unit that's received a ton of buffs over time, so I don't really see her being the one to kind of get this. And even when you look at someone like, say, Medusa has gotten some love here more recently. So it is certainly possible that she could get it again. I don't think it's that crazy. But the 3-star rider one, to me, by far, is going to be Red Hair. Red Hair, even after his buff, is still just in a extremely poor state. I think it's going to be him. We'll see if it's someone else. It could certainly be someone like Alexander, who's received some over time, or maybe even a rare one like Columbus. But I do feel like Red Hair is kind of the sore thumb that just keeps kind of sticking them, because I think a lot of people don't really want to use him due to the way that he works. He's just an all-around unimpressive unit. So they really need to kind of do something for my boy. But at the end of the day, I could see them kind of sprinkling this one around on another unit that maybe has already received more upgrades. So we'll just have to see what the 3-star rider one holds. 4-star rider, on the other hand, there is a ton of options here. And to me, there's not necessarily one that just absolutely sticks out. I do think there's potential here. You could maybe see a much newer unit like Wang Fei Hu get something. He has been kind of a nothing burger ever since he came out. He's not bad per se, but he's just really got no real claim to fame, no real reason to kind of use him. So I think he's going to be one of those where he has a really decent shot if they're just approaching this from a unit that needs it approach. But at the end of the day, I could easily see it being something even as ludicrous as a buff to Surf Mo. So I think this one is probably the most wide open out of all the buffs on this list that they could easily do. I think there's many possibilities for units to kind of receive some love here, particularly if they're looking to kind of keep some of the units in pace and kind of ahead of some of the 3-star competition there. So depending on who gets the buff for the 3-star version, you might see that actually impact who gets the buff for the 4-star version as well. But who knows at this point? I could easily see a lot of candidates. Martha would be another really decent one. Maybe even Marie Ryder at this point. But I think this one really just kind of a toss-up for who gets it. And then that brings us to, last but not least, I think one that's going to be pretty hotly contested within the community, and that's the 5-star Lancer. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and make my case right here for my obvious biased pick, and that is going to be for Lartoria, aka 5-star Lancer Artoria. Lancer Artoria is a unit that kind of, when some of the other Lancers were getting upgrades, she did get an upgrade herself, but she kind of got passed over. She only got a skill upgrade. She didn't get a Noble Phantasm upgrade. And in that regard, she kind of got done dirty, because while that upgrade itself was pretty decent, not getting that Noble Phantasm interlude has really held her back now. She's one of the lowest damaging AoE Lancers at this point, and it kind of shows. As somebody that has used her both at NP1 and obviously NP5, I really love the unit, frankly, but I can tell you NP1 absolutely does not cut it for this unit anymore. And other units that also used to be pretty low on the spectrum, like Ereshkigal, have gotten a ton of love and appreciation now. So I think it's really time for them to kind of start bringing up the back of the pack and trying to make other units more competitive with Melisson, who's still just kind of stomping all the competition. And it's actually not that hard for them to do, to bring Lartoria back online, give her an NP interlude, and really just kind of maybe either give her an overcharge or impact her amount of charge. That would allow her to touch Black Grail, and that would dramatically, between those two things, improve her damage output. That may be wishful thinking on my part, so just kind of shelving that for right now and looking at some of the other possibilities here. I think Vitra is another really strong possibility. She's a unit that really damage output's kind of gotten left behind on. She is an arts looper though, so it's a little bit more okay for her. It's always kind of been understood that the loopers are a little bit less on damage in certain ways due to their ability to kind of stay. And Vitra does still have the niche of being able to provide anti-divine to the party, which is a really nice one in that. But outside of kind of her loop ability and her anti-divine, she is really in a bad spot. She's kind of been surpassed by almost all of her competition, and at this point really could just use some kind of attention to help kind of improve her overall performance. So we'll just have to see if she ends up being a pick. And then obviously, I think another really strong one, if we're going to talk about the potential to get like a Noble Phantasm interlude, is going to be Tamamo Lancer. Tamamo Lancer, still a year one unit, absolutely a unit that people love, but she's really gotten done dirty over the years. They finally fixed her third skill and made her more applicable in the modern Klinskaya setups due to her having charge now, and that really did help her out. But she still needs that Noble Phantasm interlude, and without that, she is going to sadly fall behind her competition, especially welfare competition, with Consort U Lancer also being anti-man niche and out damaging her. So it's really not looking good for her at this point in time. They certainly could give her a Noble Phantasm interlude, and I think each one of those three has a really strong case to make. Lartoria, Vitra, or again Tamamo Lancer, but who knows, they may end up doing something completely out of left field. We may see a buff to Roma, we may see a buff to one of the other quick Lancers. It really just depends what the devs are looking for and what their goals are with this campaign. So what do you guys think about these options? Is there anyone that I missed, anyone that I didn't talk about that you guys think could really use the buff? Who would you like to see buffed? I'll be curious to hear you guys' thoughts, and thank you guys again for watching. I will see you guys for the next one later. Hey, if you liked the video, make sure to like and subscribe, right? Who do you think I am, chat?